This evening, we're going to have a short presentation, probably 8 to 10 minutes. We're going to go over a little bit high-level view on both what we're proposing on the wastewater treatment facility upgrades and also the drinking water treatment facility, the reconstruction and relocating that facility. Within those presentations, we'll also have the proposed user rates for the cost of this borrowing as well. And then after the presentation, we'd like to open it up for any public comment, questions, or additional information that we could share. With that, Mike, if you'd like to go through the presentation, and we'll go from there. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Gerbitz. I'm an engineer with Donahue and Associates, and been working on this project for a couple of years with the city. I'm going to go, as Eric said, I'll talk about the wastewater project. Steve Paddock will talk about the water project, the drinking water project, and we'll be going through some material. There isn't anything new here tonight. Tonight's really another opportunity to communicate the project and kind of be open and transparent about what's going on here. So this is largely a review, no new information here, but I think it's another important opportunity to let the public know what this project is. So as Eric said, the city is in a position now where it really needs to, because of issues and concerns that we'll be talking about throughout this presentation, address two of its really important assets. One is the wastewater treatment plant that takes the water that comes from the sewers from all of our homes and businesses, cleans it up, and discharges it back to the Wisconsin River. The drinking water facility takes groundwater out of the ground, cleans it up, and makes it suitable for us all to drink. So let's talk about the wastewater treatment facility project. This project is really being done for three core reasons. There's three primary issues that this project will address. The first is age. We'll look at how old the facility is, but it's been more than 30 years since that facility was upgraded. And over that amount of time, infrastructure has deteriorated. Equipment has gotten old and needs to be replaced. And safety standards have changed. Rules change, the WPDS permit rules change. We'll talk more specifically about those in a bit, but some improvements need to be made to maintain compliance with the discharge permit that regulates this water that goes back to the Wisconsin River. And then in general, the capacity of the plant is fine, but there are some isolated areas as we look over the next 20 years. There's a couple of areas that need to be upgraded from a capacity standpoint. So we'll talk about the first issue. First and foremost, it's just age. This is a tired facility. It dates back to 1939. The presentation shows a site plan of the wastewater treatment facility, and it's color-coded according to when different structures were constructed. The oldest structures were built in 1939. They're 80 years old. They're still in use today. They'll still be in use after this project is over. Second generation, it occurred in 1967. Those structures that are shaded yellow in the presentation, they're 50 years old. They were built in 1967. And then the new stuff was constructed in 1988. And it's just time to address that aging infrastructure. The infrastructure needs to be rehabilitated for another generation of service, and old equipment needs to be replaced, electrical and mechanical equipment. And then, in addition, the safety aspect is some of the safety standards have changed since 1988, the last construction project there. So the compliance issues is really, first and foremost, phosphorus. The rules governing discharges to the Wisconsin River have changed so that the facility and most facilities that discharge to the Wisconsin River need to remove more phosphorus than they have historically. Currently, the treatment plant needs to meet an effluent phosphorus concentration of 1 milligram per liter. That's going to change so that it will need to remove phosphorus down to about 0.5 milligram per liter. And over time, it could be even as low as 0.3 milligrams per liter. There was a recent, the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources Board recently approved the TMDL governing the rules governing the Wisconsin River that have made this change, and this will be in a future permit. The plant isn't capable of meeting those lower limits today. Another thing that's changed, there isn't a hard regulatory requirement right now to do something different than what the facility does with its biosolids, but the biosolids program, which has a long, successful history, has become more and more challenging. Weather patterns have changed, farming practices have changed quite a bit, and then today, farmers, agricultural operations need a nutrient management plan. All of those things together make land application very difficult. And that's only going to become increasingly difficult moving forward in the future. And this was the first year in many years, and this might be representative, last winter might be representative of the new normal. For the first time in a long time, a significant amount of the biosolids actually had to go to a landfill. This project will address that concern by putting in a drying process that'll take the wet material, the wet biosolids, and dry it to a Class A material that could be used by landscapers and other agricultural operations, and it will no longer be permitted. It provides a great deal of flexibility that the facility's never had, and it's a safer biosolids product than the facility's ever produced. From a capacity standpoint, there's only a couple areas. In general, the capacity of the plant is fine, but the activated sludge system, there'll be some modifications there that improve its performance, and by improving the performance of an activated sludge system, you enhance its capacity, particularly during wet weather events, when it rains. And then disinfection, that system will be enhancing its capacity a little bit, but then also providing better flood protection so that irrespective of where the Wisconsin River is, if it's below the 100-year flood, this will disinfect the entire peak flow. So we'll see in a little bit, and this has been well publicized and discussed at previous meetings, commission meetings, and council meetings. The overall project cost is $80 million. That's a tremendous amount of money for any community. It's a lot of money here in Wausau. One might think you're going to get a whole new treatment facility for that. That's not the case. The intention here, the plan here, is to upgrade the existing facility to address these different concerns and issues I went through, and to maximize the use of that tremendous investment, the tremendous amount of money Wausau has already spent on that facility. This is an upgrade project using as much of that existing infrastructure as we can. And we'll look at that in a minute. Excuse me, Mayor? Thank you. So we've submitted, the city has approved a facility plan that outlines this plan. The commission approved it, the council approved it, and the department has conditionally approved that as well. That looks at a 20-year horizon. This is a generational project. When you're doing a project of this size, the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources requires you, the EPA requires you to look at a generation at a time. So this has a life expectancy, in theory, of 20 years. These improvements that we're going to make are going to be used well beyond 20 years. This is a long-term, multi-generational project. So it's an upgrade project, as I've said, and the clear advantage of an upgrade project is you get beneficial value moving forward in the investments that you've already made. And what we're showing here is a site plan of the facility, and it's color-coded. And the blue structures will be repurposed. One of those is the large 1939 main building that's been there since 1939. That will be repurposed and continue to be used by the city moving forward in the future. The yellow structures are going to be upgraded. That infrastructure will continue to be in service. Infrastructure from 1967 and 1988. This is just going to rehabilitate that infrastructure and replace key pieces of equipment, and will remain in service after this project. And then the orange structures, and there aren't a lot of them, the orange structures will be new structures. The biggest investment will be in that new biosolids processing facility that I mentioned before, new thickening, dewatering, and drying. And that's the large orange structure in the middle of the site. The message, though, is the overwhelming majority of the infrastructure that's there will remain in service for another generation or multiple generations moving forward. And here's another rendering. It's hard for engineers to look at site plans like that, but this one might be a little better, easier to understand. This is this is a photograph with some 3D renderings of those new structures, and what we're calling out are just a handful of new buildings that'll be there, or new structures that'll be there. And the point of this is to show that the facility is going to largely look like it has looked for a long time, for 30 plus years, and there'll be a couple of new structures to supplement what's already there. As I said before, the project addresses 3 areas: age, capacity, and compliance. And the project, I also said before, the total project, and this is all in, this is construction plus engineering, all the costs associated with the project is estimated to be $80 million, and this is a pie graph showing where that money is spent within those 3 areas. And the overwhelming majority, 3/4 of the cost of this project is really to just deal with an aging facility. And of course, what everybody wants to know is, what is this going to cost me? And this is information that's been presented before. This is identical information to what we've presented before, with one exception. Before, we looked at it on a monthly basis. We all pay in Wausau our bills on a quarterly basis. This is looking at what those quarterly rates will be to fund that $80 million project. It's the user cost to finance that $80 million capital project. Today, the typical residential user here in Wausau pays about, making sure I say the right number, about $50 a month. Or they did back in 2018 before the first rate increase for this project went in place. So last year, the typical residential user paid about $50 a quarter. This year, there was a rate increase last year. 2019, the rates are up slightly. The average typical residential user pays about $61 a quarter. When this project is done and the community is paying the principal and interest on that loan, the typical residential user will pay about $88.50 a quarter. Okay? And the money, where's the money going to come from? There's a very good, reliable program here in Wisconsin. We're fortunate this way. There's something called the Clean Water Fund. That's a government, federally subsidized loan program for projects just like this. Oftentimes, that's a 20-year term. There are instances where communities can use a 30-year term, and the interest rate is extremely attractive. It's 1.65%. And so this analysis here assumes a little bit of both. Some of the infrastructure funded for 30 years, some of it for 20 years, the equipment for 20 years, and the blended rate is the result up here, all of it at 1.65%. So that's kind of an overview of the wastewater project. Again, no new information, but kind of a high-level summary of what the project is and what it's going to cost. And I think to make sure we kind of get through everything in an orderly fashion, I think we intend to open it up for questions after we talk about the drinking water project. Glad to entertain any questions anyone has after that. With that, I'll introduce Steve Paddock from Becker Hoppe.
Hi, everybody. As Mike mentioned, I'm Steve Paddock with Becker Hoppe Engineers. We're the lead firm on the design of the water treatment facility, working very closely with Donahue Engineers on this project as well. Donahue is doing the majority of the process design and the building design associated with it. As Mike mentioned, we want to talk to you about the water treatment facility, which will be undergoing a similar improvement, and sort of the order of the presentation here is going to be very similar. I'll start out with, as most people who have been in this city for a long time realize, the water treatment facility is located just north of Bridge Street. It's actually the first two buildings that are north of the bridge. So on the right side of this photo, you see Bridge Street. The River Life Park development is immediately to the to the south of it. The next building you see is the meter shop, is what it's called now. This is actually more of an operations and maintenance building. This is where all the people who repair the water lines throughout the city, change out the meters, some of the administrative work, all of that takes place in that building. And then the next building immediately to the north is the water treatment facility. Water from the 6 wells that supply City of Wausau is pumped to this facility and treated with a process called lime softening. And this facility actually replaced an older facility, but this was originally built in 1961, as you can see in red in the photo behind me. Similar to the wastewater plant, it has been modified and added on to over the years, generally on a 10 to 15 year cycle. And you can see the improvements in green and yellow and purple on it. The last major improvement was done in 1999. So again, this is a facility that hasn't had a lot of work in over 20 years. And much of the core treatment equipment is original to the 1961 project. The filters, the pumps, and a lot of the clear well facilities that we'll talk about later on in the presentation are all original to that time frame. So with a lot of work and understanding that there's a lot of work that could be needed at this facility, the city undertook a planning process to just kind of wrap their arms around what exactly needs to be done in terms of improvements to the facility. Not only age-related ones, but also ones that are required by the state, specifically the DNR, who oversees all of the water treatment facilities. Every couple of years, they come through a plant and they complete what's called a sanitary survey, and they identify areas that maybe don't meet new or improved codes, or in the case of some of the things that they identified in their last survey here, have advanced them to a point of setting a timeline where they must be completed. Am I hitting the button the wrong way? Am I supposed to go down? Right arrow, thank you, I'm sorry. And again, a similar grouping of the issues that we found, we grouped into 3 major categories. One is longevity. We know we need to do a lot of work at this facility. And is it really a good idea to make a substantial investment at this location? With the understanding of it's a site that is definitely constrained along the riverbank there and adjoining railroad track, and also with some changes in the general character of the area with the development of the River Life project. Then there's several regulatory issues, which I touched on in my first slide, and I'll go into a little more detail later on. And then also some water quality issues. These are all aesthetic and cosmetic type water quality issues. The water that the existing plant puts out is safe to drink. It's of good quality, but there's always improvements that can be made. And I'll talk about those a little more later on here as well. So with longevity, one of the things that's different about this slide is you're going to see some blue shapes on it. And if we were to construct all of the facilities that would be ideal to improve this plant on the existing site, those are the buildings or tanks that we would need to construct. And it's already constrained by the river and the railroad, and there's some existing facilities to the south and other buildings to the north. We would essentially fill that lot, and there would be no additional room for development if there were future improvements needed after this generation of projects. The second thing I want to point out is, as we note that it's within the 500-year floodplain. The main floodplain is generally called the 100-year plain, and you're not allowed to have a water treatment facility in that area at all. When this plant was originally built in 1961, it was acceptable to construct a plant within the 500-year floodplain. Something that if this were to be built today, we would not be able to construct in that same location. That no longer allow these facilities to be built in the 500-year floodplain. In terms of regulations, one of the key ones that was identified is a non-compliant clear well. And this is after the water is treated and disinfected and ready to be pumped out into the system for our use. It resides in a tank. And in the case of this 1961 facility, that tank was built below ground. And given how close we are to the river, it also happens to be below the water table. This is something that's been an initiative of the DNR over the last several years. There's many, many plants throughout the state that have this same condition. And however, they are now requiring all communities to relocate these clear wells out of the water table. So some of the structures that were shown on the previous slide were to build tanks on site that are above the water table. The primary reason for this is with groundwater and untreated water, there's a risk of untreated water infiltrating within those concrete structures and a risk of pathogen contamination from that. Another regulation that has cropped up, and this is actually a rather recent DNR ruling, is something called groundwater under the direct influence. And Wausau's wells are relatively shallow. We get our water from wells that are about around 120 feet deep, give or take. Some are deeper, some are a few feet shallower. But in the world of wells, that's classified as shallow. And the consideration and concern there is that deep enough where the filtering capacity of the soils is reduced to a point where there may be pathogens or viruses present in groundwater. That's something that's a function of research that has occurred over the last decade or so. And it's, again, something that all communities that have shallow wells is likely going to have to, they're going to have to address with any plant upgrades they have. And the main changes is since there could be a greater risk for some pathogens, we want to make sure we do an extra good job of disinfecting and also providing sufficient time in our tanks and reservoirs to properly disinfect the water before we pump it out. So there's also some other issues that this rises in terms of how the plant must be operated, and just add some additional requirements about testing and methods of treatment. And the final issue that we were talking about was water quality. And again, these are mainly things that we want to improve and do a better job of producing a better water for the customers of Wausau Waterworks. The first one here is to remove natural dissolved organic matter. We're in an area blessed with lots of trees and leaves, and anytime rainfall falls through and infiltrates through that matter, a little bit of it dissolves into the water. When this water it's safe, it's not causing harm, but it does cause some aesthetic issues. One of the ones noticed in Wausau Water is a slight green tint to it. You notice this most if you fill up a bathtub or you fill up like a white styrofoam cup. Not harmful, but a cosmetic and aesthetic thing that is, the city is recognized, and they're, have more comments and complaints about it. And so certainly one of the things we would want to do is improve that water quality and remove that color by removing the matter that creates it. The other items, all of the communities in the Wausau area have lots of iron and manganese in the waters. That's currently the primary reason we treat our water today, and we just want to do a better job of removing that iron and manganese going forward. And then finally, I guess, as we mentioned on there, for water quality, providing some space for future drinking water regulations and additional treatment. We're fixing the needs that have been identified today, and as things progress in the next generation, there may be other challenges they need to face in water supply, and we want to give them enough space to handle those as well. So when all of these facts were presented early this year or late last year and early this year to the Utility Commission and then to City Council, the choice or decision was made to construct a new drinking water treatment facility. And this would be done on property that the city already owns, and it's actually closer to most of the wells that we receive our drinking water from, and it's located about a mile directly north on the other side of the river from the existing facility. This is a basic schematic showing the location of the plant on the property that is just north of Bugby Avenue. I had to make sure I had my notes there. On the left side of the photo would be the intersection of Bugby and Burrick Avenue, and then on the north end where you see a driveway entering to reach the new facility, that would be East Campus Drive. The site that the facility would be constructed on is, I think, around 13 acres in size, and that will house the drinking water treatment facility, our above-ground clear wells, so we don't have any of the water table issues that we have at the existing plant, and then also have room for a distribution system or an O&M building to replace the garage and meter shop that is located between the bridge and the existing water treatment facility. A couple other things I wanted to point out about this is, throughout this design phase and at other public information meetings, we recognize that this facility will be constructed in what is relatively primarily a residential area. So the siting of the plant within the property has been done to move it as far north as possible to maintain as much of the existing tree screening along Bugby Avenue. And actually, the ground elevation there is recessed down from most of the streets in the area, so it'll be a little further below to minimize the visual impact of this facility to the surrounding neighborhood. And as Mike mentioned with the wastewater plant, we're operating under the same costs that have been discussed before in previous meetings. And going back to our planning level work, our project budget is a total of $41 million. This includes money for constructing of a new water treatment plant, and also improvements to get the wells to pump to this new facility and to make some changes within the water distribution system to pump water out to the rest of the community. So this total cost is estimated at $41 million. And on this slide, you'll see there's a little bit of an asterisk there. And part of that is the recent development that we mentioned about groundwater under the direct influence is something that has come to light and has been pushed forward by DNR since this planning and these initial budget costs are coming from. We are designing the new facility to comply with these new regulations and requirements in anticipation that they are going to have to be put in right away. The asterisk is that was not part of the original plan, so there may be a change in our overall budget to construct the facility based on those new requirements. And similarly, everybody in the city gets a quarterly sewer bill. You also get a quarterly water bill. And on a quarterly basis, the average user pays a little more than $46, almost $47 a quarter. The construction of this project under the planned $41 million budget would result in an increase of just under $20 per quarter to the average residential user, with the estimated quarterly cost of your water bill to fund this new plant would be $66.34. The graph that you see is how Wausau's water rates in the blue area compare to many of the other communities within the area, and also much of the, call it the peer group, similar-sized cities throughout the state. That's really all we wanted to present on the water treatment facility at this time. And as Mike mentioned, we would like to entertain any questions on either the wastewater facility or the water facility at this time.
I don't know if there's any public comments or questions that we can take, or I think one of the things I would like to point out is, over the last couple of years, we did start with the planning phase of both of these projects. And when we stepped into this initially, because our capital budgets were increasing every year. And so borrowing more and more money every year, and the projects were just getting larger, was the reason we stepped into the facility planning phase of these projects. And the issues within the plants, they're pervasive. So, if we touch one part of the plant, it's not just that we have to make that upgrade to accommodate that treatment process. We also have to deal with the new code issues. We also have to address the safety issues, and make the plant compliant. So as we move through the plant and the different processes for both of them, those costs kept escalating. And so we had hired Becker, Hoppy, and Donahue to put those plans together, working with the DNR, to try to figure out what the best course of action for us was and is moving forward with the Wausau Waterworks and the utility. We got to the point to where a full upgrade at the wastewater treatment plant was the best option at this point. Not only just from a single project standpoint, borrowing rates are a great time to borrow money at this point, knowing that we are going to have to increase rates throughout the city for this. The water treatment plant was the same when we walked through that. Steve had pointed out that we did look at making accommodations at the existing location. And really, when we look at a project that's multi-generational, 50-plus years down the road, to kind of pinch us in, not knowing what the future regulations will be in 10, 15, 20 years down the road, in having to move it at that point, we felt it was a better option. That's what we presented to the Wausau Waterworks Commission and City Council, and they agreed, and this moved forward. We had several public information and presentations along this route to both the Committee of the Whole, the Wausau City Council, as well as Wausau Waterworks over the last couple of years. And we've also had some public information meetings on the relocation of the drinking water treatment facility at NTC. And we received public input mainly from that group in that area, that lived in that area, but also from other areas of the city as well. We have all that information on our website under the utilities, and we've documented all of those comments and questions that you're more than welcome to pull up as well. But again, I would open up the floor to any questions, comments, concerns that you've heard tonight, or, yes, ma'am? Yeah, the question is, what's the timeline for the facilities? So they will both be bid for construction to begin next year in 2020. The drinking water treatment facility will be bid first. We anticipate opening bids sometime in February for that project. We hope to break ground probably sometime in late spring, early summer for that project. The wastewater treatment facility will be bid after that. They will be staggered, because I think we will have some of the same bidders. We will open bids a month or so after the drinking water treatment facility, March, April timeframe. And we are, at this point, proposing to close on those loans in June with the DNR and move these projects forward at this time. 2 years, so the end of 2022 is what we're proposing. That hasn't changed, right, guys? We're still on
2
that.
years for the
What?
water treatment
Yeah.
facility.
Okay, so, yeah. Yep. Yes,
You mentioned groundwater under the direct influence of surface water. What's the plan to address that? Do you drill deeper wells? Do you relocate the wells or modify the wells in some fashion? Because the pricing was just, was kind of nebulous, I guess, on how that was gonna, So I guess just a little bit more information on this.
Sure. What the requirements establish is essentially you don't really have to do anything different at your wells. The function of your wells is the deeper you go, the more expensive it is to build a well, and also the more costly it is to operate them. Again, the overall water quality is very good at where we're pumping out of. So it wouldn't necessarily be financially prudent, and it wouldn't necessarily be ensured that we would get a better, maybe a water with less iron and manganese if we went deeper. That's something that is done every time you drill a new well. That's something that's looked at very closely. The wells we have in that area produce a lot of water at that level. And so really what it is just to make sure that you treat it well. There's many facilities in the state that use surface water, either out of like Lake Winnebago or Lake Michigan, where they're actually treating surface water for use. When you're a facility with groundwater under the direct influence, you're sort of a hybrid between a water well that you can essentially pump it right out of the ground. Like most people that live in a rural area, you don't do any treatment, you just pump it out of the ground and it's safe to drink. In a community area where you have water that's going to many more users and has to flow through the over 200 miles of piping, you want to make sure that that water is as clean as possible so you don't have more cosmetic issues, and then also that you're adding disinfection so that if water is in a pipe for 2 or 3 days before it gets to a community, there isn't a risk for it. I'm kind of arriving at the answer here is so the groundwater under direct influence sort of puts you in between those two. And just you want to make sure you're doing a little better job of disinfection, longer contact times for when in this case, when you're adding chlorine, and also doing some really close monitoring of your process to make sure that you don't have any indicators that you may have water of a less quality.
So that can be handled at the treatment stage, and it doesn't really concern the wellheads themselves.
That's correct, yes.
If you don't mind me interjecting?
Yes, this is Susan Watkowitz from Donahue Engineers, part of our project design team.
And here in Wausau, your option to go deeper with your wells really isn't there because the sand and gravel is underlain by bedrock, and that granite bedrock is not going to be water bearing. So really, you don't have an option to go deeper, at least in the context of getting a municipal well.
Getting purer water, cleaner water. Theoretically. Yes.
found this to be very informative, and I applaud both groups for the work. How many more of these presentations will there be, and/or because it's being recorded, will that go out on the website for folks to view? I think, for me personally, this cleared up a number of questions that I had. But I'm just thinking of the regular citizen talking to me about why their water rate is rising, and rather than me explain it to them, maybe they can just go to the website and watch.
Right.
Oh, if only I was really this tall, but this has been an ongoing process for several years. This has been filmed, even our water commission, which had never been done before, to let residents know that this was a possibility and happening, the cost associated with it, the debt that would be taken on with it, and really the reasons why it's being done. The longer we put it off, the more expensive it's going to be. This is infrastructure that is old, and like so many of our different projects here throughout the city, it needs to be addressed, and now is the time to do it. With interest rates as low as they are right now, different programs that we could take advantage of, the city doing very well economically. Now's the time to replace a lot of infrastructure, which is what we have been doing for the last couple of years. And this is very expensive, but folks, we all use it, and it needs to be taken care of. But this has been ongoing now for some time. Public hearings, I don't see how anybody can't know, but just in case they don't, it's there available on the website, our city television. I mean, anybody can get a hold of us. We're always very open-minded, very accessible. But really, folks, this is something that needs to be done.
I will carry the flag high. But I appreciate it. In all sincerity, folks did a great job with this, and the more that we can talk about it, I think the more folks will understand. So great job.
Thank you for the comment, and I want to kind of follow up on that and offer some perspective. These are really important projects. They're also, this infrastructure, these assets are critical to any community. They're expensive projects that the entire community is going to pay for, and people should be asking a lot of questions. I've been doing this a long time, all over the upper Midwest. I've worked on a lot of projects for more than a generation, and seen the way a lot of different communities handle projects like this. And I just thought it'd be maybe good for the community to know, maybe for some of the commissioners to know, that this has been the most open and communicative process, having worked on a lot of projects like this, the most communicative and open process that I've ever seen. I think this is probably my 7th or 8th public meeting. Some of these poor people have endured these presentations over and over again. But I think all of those have been recorded and streamed. This meeting is going to be streamed, and I don't know, I've never seen a community work harder to make sure everybody in town knows and avoid the conspiracies of what this is all about, to know exactly how important this project is and what it is. And I just wanted to offer that, because I think the entire community should be commended for the way they've approached these two big expensive projects that are very important.
Yeah, I think too, we have been, and the Waterworks Commission knows this as well. Ellers, our financial consultant, has been working with us too to kind of show us the path forward on the utility side and what's the best way to handle the debt service. And so they have filed the first of a couple rate increases. And so those are going through the process with the PSC on the drinking water treatment facility side. Because the PSC does regulate rates on the drinking water side. The city council and the city itself can raise the rates on the sewer just by resolution through the city council, and those will be moving forward as well. But they'll be stepped, so we're not, residents aren't seeing it all at once, but as the facilities are constructed over time, in the year 2023, that's when the last major step increase is proposed to move forward. So those figures with Ellers, to include both our existing debt in the utility as well as this borrowing and as well as the next 5 years for our capital projects that we have planned. Those numbers are still being worked out with Ellers. And so there will be additional information based on, what those rates and stuff are coming in the spring. We don't have any more public information meetings specifically on the plants planned for right now. if there are additional requests, you know, we can always put something together as we move forward. So I guess that, yes. Yeah?
Been asked before, and it's difficult because we don't know what the future will bring, because there are different chemicals being found in water now for which what harmful or harmless levels have not been established, like I think it's the PFAS.
The PFAS, yes.
Yes, so some of these things, because we don't know how much is harmful, how much is benign, so what kind of flexibility is built into the treatment facility to allow for filtering out things in the future that may need to be filtered out, that we don't know how much will need to be filtered out yet?
Right, so, you know, it's one of the important reasons why we moved the drinking water treatment facility we're proposing to, so we have the space. I mean, we don't know what the new regulations are gonna be. We have ideas on what they're looking at with PFAS is an interesting one. You know, we know that we're below any of the standards in our drinking water right now for it, but we don't know what the DNR is gonna implement for a standard. We do know that the EPA has a 70 parts per trillion standard, which is very small. And so we feel like the space that we have at the new facility, that, you know, whatever does come down the road, we have the plans where we have the ability to expand, to add on if we need to accommodate these types of treatments. The PFAS is interesting because now they're talking about it on the wastewater side as well. And so they don't have a testing standard on the wastewater side. They, you know, and so at the wastewater treatment plant, we're kind of following that as closely as we can. And we really don't know. I think the idea, talking with the DNR and the other regulators, is really try to find the source where it's coming into the wastewater and try to eliminate it there. And so we've been working with the League of Municipalities and the Municipal Environmental Group and things like that, and trying to find out ways that we can reach out to industries and businesses, find out if it's there, if they're using it, if they're discharging it, and then how do we eliminate that. So being a little bit more proactive. Mm-hmm.
You guys are making it too easy, come on.
I appreciate everybody coming, I do. Thanks to Donahue and Becker Hoppy for the presentations, and thank you for the questions. The questions that came up, they'll be answered online as well. We'll put out a press release with those. We'll also put a link, Steve, to where people can access this video with that press release. I think that's a very good idea, so we will do that. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.